Yes, for many of you, this is my first live event, so it feels a little bit unusual. Although, shout out to the organizers of this conference, as last year it was also, I think, one of the first events, live events happening at, well, just after the lockdown. So somehow either you're, lucky or just very resilient to the to this pandemic. So good job, and thanks for getting us all together. Also, thanks to all the speakers, as I'm the last one today, so interesting insights. I'm hoping that some of them will be in the post-conference gathering. Some topics I can really relate deeply with. Say even the last presentation was like, the cycle growth, then compliance, which stops the growth, and then you try to search for the balance, like, sounds so familiar to us. So today, I would like to talk a little bit about fintech and banks coexistence together in this day and age. ArcaPay is not a high street name, so some of you may have not come across it. We are a cross-border payments company, and actually we started out in 2011, initially in London, UK. Our initial business was built on migrant remittances, so we were catering for immigrants from Eastern European countries who were sending funds back to their families. After a few years, we pivoted to the business space and started focusing on business-to-business transactions, and that remains our kind of core target market to this date. So we do cross-border payments, foreign exchange, and currency risk management solutions for small and medium-sized enterprises. We really strive to deliver these services at better terms than commercial banks, and at the same time providing them with superior customer experience and customer service. Our business model is somewhat different from some of previous speakers, as we're not really trying to kind of conquer the world, but rather we are going after specific niche segments and try to penetrate those specific segments to the largest extent that we can. For example, it may be Lithuanian small and medium-sized businesses that are importing things from China, or it could be small and medium-sized businesses in the UK set up by Polish immigrants that have dealings with their home countries. And then we would go after those segments fairly aggressively. As a regulated business, well, we've had our fair share of dealing with the regulators. So in the UK, we went through 4 authorizations and reauthorizations throughout the years. And more recently, in Lithuania, on the back of Brexit, we set up an entity over here, and we're granted a payment institution license by the Bank of Lithuania. Really, all the challenges that fintechs, get to face in one way or the other, they have affected us as well. But even though I'm wearing sort of a fintech hat today, well, not literally, my personal professional background comes from banking, as I was previously pursuing a banking career in the City of London. So I would like to say that my views expressed today, they have been to a degree shaped by both experiences. And when I think about my sort of work in a fintech and compare it with the time I spent in a bank, the feelings are sort of mixed. When you work in a bank, you come to a well-established, fairly well-running institution. You have a clearly defined role, and if you put some effort, you become good at it, and you live a comfortable lifestyle with good job security. The downside of that is perhaps that because the role is clear, you get good at it and you get to the comfort zone. And then what happens is that you start doing things year in and year out. And then perhaps the challenge fades a little bit because that comfort zone keeps you glued to it, to that sweet spot. The fintech environment, working for a fintech is rather different. The environment is fluid. There is lack of processes which you have to build. Sometimes that's exciting. Sometimes that's a little bit annoying. With the fintech though, with the startup in the spirit, what you get is that it's much easier to make a difference. You can take a decision and feel the effect, which doesn't get sort of diluted by the large organization. But those challenges in the fintech, as in this illustration, they just kind of keep presenting themselves day in and day out. So it's again partially exciting, partially daunting at some point. Obviously, this is with a degree of irony, so should be taken with a pinch of salt. But this is a fair comparison, I would say. Now, when I reflect back on those experiences, the sort of non-scientific observation that came to me, or kind of realization, was how organizations treat clients differently depending on their maturity, depending on the stage of the organization. So if you are at your inception, a newly set up business, well, you are prepared to do whatever it takes to attract a new client. Like, client is king. You're prepared to do whatever it takes to please that client. You don't really have many of them, so hey, client is the king. As the business grows, it's sort of a bit like a comparison with the honeymoon period. It's beautiful, but it comes to an end, and then kind of real life kicks in. So here you get to deal with the day-to-day stuff, internal meetings, reporting, managerial challenges, audits, and all that starts eating into your time and attention to the end client. So gradually, as time goes on, the attention paid to the end client diminishes, and I'm kind of inclined to state that incumbent commercial banks, they have found themselves on the far right end of this chart, whereby the customer service is no longer at the core of their operations. And by no means I'm saying that bankers do not care about clients. There are a lot of people in all banks really that are passionate, that are very customer centric. But at the organization level, those efforts get watered down, and the end client doesn't really feel that they are kind of loved. A bit of an anecdotal example probably is, like, if you send a random standard request to a bank, you will receive an automated response. We'll come back to you in 3 days. If you send a similar request to a kind of operating fintech startup, you will likely get a response within 3 hours. If you happen to probably come to someone at that inception stage, you may get a response within 3 minutes even. And that's just the spirit those companies operate. There are many other examples we could discuss about, but this is just kind of one of the illustrations which I think shows that organizations get complacent at a certain point. You grow your client portfolio, you start classifying them. Some of the clients are important, some of them less so. That drags away the attention from them. So the key takeaway here is that the emergence of fintechs has made banks rethink their business models. And we have heard quite a few talks earlier today about how banks are changing their behaviors. I would like to say to a degree because of fintechs. Like Citadel, they are proud that they launched remote onboarding last year in 2020. I'm not sure if, let's say, Revolut has ever onboarded a client, in person rather than digitally, from their day one. So, because someone started doing things differently, the incumbent banks, they were almost forced to up their game. And if you are a conservative consumer, which still sticks with this bank and doesn't use any fintech services, you don't have that app on your phone, I would dare to say that you have already benefited from existence of fintechs anyway, just because your bank was already forced almost to improve their offering and service to you. Now, the banks and fintechs, they have coexisted for some time, and it's interesting to observe the trends. And one of the trends which we recently, which we discussed earlier today, I think Evila touched on that fintechs started looking at their origins as a sandbox before they become banks. So even though they started somewhere further away from the banks, they're now turning into banks. TransferWise, now trading as Wise, just recently, well, not that long time ago, they're organizing protests, public protests against sneaky bankers. Now they have some banking licenses on their own belt. Revolut, again, premier challenger of banks, globally. They now provide some services, from their banking license. I actually realized after Andres' presentation that this headline is already stale, because he said 12 countries. Now this is just 10, so that's a fast pace they're moving. Closer to home, a couple of companies like PayRay and SME Finance, which started off as challengers to the banks in the lending space. They now have their bank licenses as well. So it seems that the trend is that the more successful fintechs, they get closer to the border of the banks, which separates one from each other, and sometimes they even hop over that line. Meanwhile, and again, what we heard earlier today, banks, they have found themselves in a position of maybe a little bit unfashionable, a little bit untrendy, a little bit forgotten, away from that fintech buzz, and they're trying to address that. So some of them are launching marketplaces, some of them are collaborating, acquiring fintechs, or actually pretty much copycatting some solutions built by fintechs, which pushes them, certainly closer to the fintechs. I've even come across a blog by a fintech-focused blog by Swedbank in Lithuania. Something you would hardly come across even on a fintech website, and just looking at the tone of the headline, and apologies for non-Lithuanian speakers, this is hardly a sort of headline you would expect to see from a bank, traditional bank, which started its origins in 1820. So the banks are really trying to narrow the gap which separates them from fintechs and sort of feel a little bit more fintechy. Meanwhile, the fintechs, they are kind of trying to operate more like banks. And the gap is narrowing. And they're meeting somewhere in the middle, hence the title of the presentation. They're meeting somewhere in the middle. But why does that matter? And it matters because they're in the middle sits the happy client. Sits the client that benefits from the competition between the two, from the lessons the two sides learn from each other, and from the innovation that stems out of that coexistence of banks and fintechs. And there's enough space in the market for both banks and fintechs to coexist. And as long as there is healthy competition between them, I'm pretty sure that there will be continued benefit driven home for the end consumer. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.